Psychoanalysis, School Integration Series, Discussion 4, the anal stage. Last time we saw the oral stage, 2 years to 3.5 years. And today we will see the anal stage. Freud defined the anal stage as the period of 2 to 3.5 years of age. What is important is in the Freudian conceptualization, as we move from the oral stage to the anal stage, there is an increase in focus from libido to aggression. In the oral stage also we talk of oral aggression, but the emphasis is not so much as it is in the anal stage on the centrality of aggression. So somehow the focus shifts from libido to aggression. In the oral stage, we get an impression it is more a stage of libido and less a stage of aggression. As we move to the anal stage, we get a different impression that this stage is more a stage of aggression and less of libido. If we bring in later Freud, oral stage seems to be more a stage of life instinct, less of death instinct. Whereas in the anal stage, the relative significance reverses. The anal stage seems to be more driven by death instinct than life instinct relative to the oral stage. What we find in the Freudian description of the anal stage are new elements coming to the center stage. Psychic elements like power, greed, repetition, inertia, they come to the center stage. Power, greed, and repetition are clearly mentioned. Creativity also is mentioned. I forgot to put it here. So we see power, greed, repetition, creativity coming to the center stage. It's almost as though more and more of the man is slowly coming into his being. From an infant, we are now looking at a little adult. Adult in formation, but still a little adult, where elementals of power, greed, repetition, creativity have now got active and are in play. Not directly in the psychosexual stages description, but the later Freud talks about death instinct and inertia being a element of that death instinct. A fundamental elemental in the phenomena of death instinct. And that is responsible in a way to result in repetition. It is inertia manifests in one way, that by repetition it ensures stability. So in that way, when inertia tries to sublimate itself into stability, one way to achieve stability in a dynamic system is to have equilibrium of forces, or the second way is to have repetition. So if we bring later Freud into the psychosexual stages, and this is a difficulty with Freud, he never revised earlier work in the light of later discovery. But if we were to do it, then inertia through repetition would make itself felt in the anal stage. Similarly, Freud talks about guilt as being hair of the Oedipus complex. So it was after the resolution of Oedipus complex at the age of 5, some would say 7, but usually 5. 4 to 5 is the range, that guilt makes a presence felt in the Freudian scheme of things. But if we were to bring in Klein, or if we were to look at just the clinical manifestation of obsessive compulsive range of disorders rooted in the anal stage, we realize that perhaps some rethinking on guilt being present in the anal stage, and therefore either it is inborn or created in some other way, or there is a proto-Oedipus, as Klein talks about, at 2.5 years. But somehow, and guilt may be created as a heir to that preponed Oedipus complex. Conceptualization apart, the clinical experience puts weight upon us to consider the presence of guilt in the anal stage. Well, let us look at Klein, how differently she talks about the same period. Klein talks about many things, but two important elements are this. Klein prepons Oedipus from 4 to 5 to 2.5. And Klein believes guilt is inborn. For Mahler, much of separation, individuation, reparation is done by 24 months of age. So 2 years is where Mahler is done. 2 to 3.5 we are referring to is not as significant as the first 2 years are for Mahler. Same period, 2 to 3.5 is important for Kohut, very important. In fact, for Kohut, it is 1 to 5 or 1 to 4, which is even more important. That is where one of the core concerns of Kohut mirroring as a phenomena takes place. And there are 5 A's of mirroring. We have talked about it before. Acknowledgement, attention, acceptance, admiration, and affection. And apart from this, the natural narcissism and exhibitionism. Till 1 year, the motor actions are highly limited. The social cognitive functioning also is limited. But after 1, and especially 2 to 4, is one of the core ages for the cohesion phenomena. We can say 2 to 5, but in a proto stage, it would begin at 1 to 5. The same anal phase period also is the period of crystallization in the child's mind about the small other, and a hazy introduction to the big other. A proto introduction, let us say, to the big other, especially when the child is taken out by the small other. How can we integrate things into the anal phase across schools? It will call for two operations: developing theory and recasting existing theory. The first thing we'll have to bring in the integration process is the Kleinian point of a proto-Oedipus at 2.5. And this is very true because I have also seen from analysis of dreams of children in the age group of 2 to 4 that the Oedipus is already present, especially 3 to 4, sorry, much before Freud's beginning of the Oedipus, which means perhaps Klein is correct that there is a preponed Oedipus at 2.5. And also we see very obvious Oedipal behavior at 4 to 5. So that's also true. So maybe we are looking at a proto-Oedipus and a full Oedipus. Or maybe there are two Oedipal phases. Why we don't know? Why nature can't complete it at one go? We don't know. But there seem to be two Oedipal phases. Either one is proto and the second is full, or maybe both are full. That remains to be developed as a concept. Guilt being inborn also is clinically observable in the act of reparation. So it is not from Oedipus that guilt is born. Even if we keep Oedipus at 2.5, even before 2.5, guilt can be seen in reparation. One can counter this by saying that the reparation may not be out of guilt, but maybe out of the survival need to maintain an attachment, which may well be. But the chances of guilt being inborn are higher on the lines of Klein and also Jung. Jung would not call it guilt, he would call it the moral complex. But for him also it was inborn. The third important element in integration is to bring about the life and death instinct concepts into re-understanding of the psychosexual stages. And also into the anal stage by implication. The fourth is the emergence of power, greed, reputation, skill, creativity, almost getting in a proto stage, in a proto way, getting ready for society. So in that sense, the anal stage also is a proto-social stage. There is a heightening of guilt. We don't know why. That calls for some development of theory. And then there is a very important element of integration of how performance of one phase or one stage affects the next stage. So if something goes wrong in the oral stage, maybe something Freudian or something Kleinian, will it affect in the anal stage? Obviously it does. Each stage will affect the performance of each stage will affect the performance in the next stage. And it's very rare that a stage of development is flawed and yet you are able to successfully go through the next stage. It's very rare. And then we look at two problems in the integration process: a intra-school problem, which is a problem within a school, and an inter-school problem. Intra-school problem would be, say, in the Freudian scheme of things, why should the relative significance of death and life instincts change from oral to anal? Or how do we account for guilt in the anal phase before the Oedipus? It would be an intra-school problem. Inter-school problem would be if the paranoid schizoid split is open and you go into the anal stage versus the paranoid schizoid split is closed and you go into the anal stage, how does it affect your developmental journey through the anal stage? It would be taking concept from one school and applying it to another school. So this also is an area where theory develop in intra-school, it has to be essentially recast and slight development of theory. Inter-school problem, essentially it's a developmental, the theory development problem across schools. So with this, some lighter remarks on integration in the anal stage, we stop for the moment, not to make it very complicated. We'll come to it later when we do more complicated analysis. For the moment, as a concise beginning, we stop today with the anal stage, and we will, in a concise way, similarly, go through the Oedipal stage in the next discussion. Thank you.